Hello everyone, welcome to Asian Digest on ATN. I'm your host, Sam and Dylan, and today on the show we're talking about different types of compensation claims and what to do if you're injured. And to help us out, we've got back on the show one of our favorites, Nainesh Kotak from Kotak Personal Injury Law. Well, welcome back.
Thank you, it's great to be back.
It's great to have you because honestly, every time we have you here, I learn so much about injury claims and legislation, and I know our viewers really appreciate it. So today we've got you back, and we're going to actually talk about a specific type of claim. Before we get into that, though, I know sometimes our viewers, we haven't had you here, I think, for like a year, so let's maybe refresh everyone's memory.
Sure.
So personal injury law, what does that mean? What kind of claims do you actually work on?
Right. We act for clients who've been injured in car accidents, slip and falls, product liability. We also act for people who've been denied disability benefits, such as long-term disability benefits or Canada Pension Plan benefits. Anything really to do with disputes with insurance companies, whether it's their own insurance company or an at-fault claim against the other driver who was at fault in a car accident situation. Those are the claims that we handle.
And most importantly, I know you are very big in the South Asian community, right?
Yes,
Because
yes.
you're able to speak different languages and understand, obviously, the cultural differences. So talk to us about that.
Well, our office is quite multi-ethnic. We have people who speak Punjabi, Hindi, Urdu. We have Italian-speaking personnel. We have actually Arabic and Spanish-speaking personnel as well.
Also, it's expanded. We've got lots.
So we really are can serve the entire Canadian community at our office, and you know, me being from a South Asian background, I obviously love to help our own community as much as I can.
Fantastic. So let's talk about a specific type of claim, psychological claims, right? So what does that mean?
All right. Psychological injuries are almost like a taboo for many in different communities, and in terms of what it is, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, phobias, whether caused by trauma, direct trauma to the brain, or through emotional stimuli, such as bad events that have occurred in someone's life. So really that's what psychological impairments or injuries are.
Okay, so maybe give us an example of
Sure.
one, because when I think psychological, I think of people that are in very high demand pressure jobs, like a air traffic controller, right? And or if you witness something traumatic at work, something happens, like some customer passes away, or you know, you just see a coworker, something happens to them. I think that's what I think of. So maybe break it down
Sure.
to kind of what kind of incidents you see.
That's more of the examples that you gave are more of a shocking event.
All about the shock.
But even something so simple as a car accident where there's some injury. Now, there may be direct trauma to the head, so that the brain itself may react due to bleeding, and there could be destruction of different parts of the brain that lead to emotional reactions. But it could be simple as having a lot of pain. So the person cannot do the things they used to do. Maybe they can't work as effectively as they did before. They don't have relations at home the way they did before, difficulties with housekeeping. And what happens sometimes, over time, it creates a toll. The person realizes, look, I can't do what I did before, and they become depressed. And then they start to withdraw, not involved socially as they used to. And we see this a lot. I'll give you a statistic. They say that 20%, when I say they, I'm talking about the Canadian Mental Health Association, we're looking about 20% of the population, so really 1 in 5 people at some point in their life in Canada will experience some form of mental illness, often it's depression, anxiety, but it's quite prevalent but unrecognized.
So then what kind of claims are actually accepted then?
Right. Many claims are accepted. It could be from a car accident, again, the sadness or the feeling of hopelessness. It might be a workplace situation. And this really goes to the long-term disability claims. I see situations where the person is in such a stressful environment. It might not be a physical job. It could be an office job. But they're there could be a colleague that they're having difficulty with, a supervisor, a superior they're having difficulty with, or just simply a combination of events in the home with events in the work, and it just makes it so difficult to work. And what do? They make specific claims. They make claims, long-term disability claim, they make Canada Pension planned claims, maybe even a workplace injury claim as well in those situations.
See, I think this is so interesting because, whenever you've been on the show, I used to work my summers at a workers' compensation board. So I would see types of claims. So I know from the workplace standpoint what they would accept and what they wouldn't. So when we would get these type of claims, we never accepted them because unless it was a specific incident, right? I know that's different from, having your own private insurance or whatnot. So let's actually talk a little bit about that because let's say I am just stressed. Maybe I'm getting depressed. Maybe I'm going through a divorce. Maybe, my family is just, something's happening there. I'm not necessarily affected to a specific incident like a car accident or related to my job.
Right.
Can you still help us out?
Absolutely. We see these type of cases all the time. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's difficult because the person themselves, they're saying, well, look, I'm not feeling good. I'm feeling down. I'm really having a hard time working, or they've actually stopped working. Mm-hmm. But the people around them don't understand why. Mm-hmm. And it's the accumulative effect of, like you said, the situation at home, a little bit of a situation at work. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're predisposed to depression. Mm-hmm. They've had trauma in the past. And we help people out in those situations. How do we help them out? Well, you're probably correct that there may be some difficult issues with the WSIB type of claim. Mm-hmm. But in terms of a short or long-term disability claim, these are the type of cases. Yes, and I'll tell you why. And I sort of touched on it last time I was on. For long-term disability claims, most policies have two different tests. Mm-hmm. For the first 2 years, it's whether you can perform, whether you're substantially disabled for performing the essential tasks of your existing job. Mm-hmm. And after 2 years, it becomes whether or not you're totally disabled mm-hmm. from performing any gainful occupation mm-hmm. that you're reasonably suited by way of education, training, or experience. Mm-hmm. So often insurers will say, look, okay, you had a bit of a physical job, but now 2 years have passed, you've got some education, you can do a sedentary job. Mm-hmm. Now that may be true if it's just some sort of a physical problem. Mm-hmm. But if there's a psychological impairment as well, mm-hmm. it may be even difficult to do a sitting job because their mind is not there. Mm-hmm. They can't get up in the morning to even get to work. They can't mm-hmm. focus. And those actually are the claims that I find are quite successful. I've been very successful with those claims because insurers eventually realize, they may deny initially, but eventually they realize if it's built where the case is built up well, and it's a legitimate case where the person has complained to their doctors about it, but yeah, they can't do some other job.
And plus they're coming to you, right? So of course you've got a great track record.
Well, we do our best.
And we're going to talk about that a little bit, especially, if someone has this type of claim that they want to pursue, what to do. But we got to take a little commercial break, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Asian Digest on ATN. I'm your host, Sam and Dylan, still chatting with Nainesh Kotak from Kotak Personal Injury Law. Now, today we're talking about psychological claims, which I think is very, very fascinating. This is something that, there's so many types of claims and there's so many factors that play into, what is considered, what is not considered. So let's go to the South Asian community specifically. You've talked a little bit about, it could be depression, it could be related to a specific incident, and there's so many other causes of it. When you have clients coming in and talking about, I don't know, this is how I'm feeling, is this just part of life or is this actually something I can claim for? What do you find comes across your desk most often?
Right. When a new client comes in for an injury claim, whether mm-hmm. it's a car accident or a disability-related claim, we do an intake. So obviously the client will tell their story, what has happened, how mm-hmm. they're feeling. But then we probe deeper. We ask specific questions to see what physical problems there are and what psychological problems mm-hmm. there are. And sometimes what I find in the South Asian community is that they will identify, I'm just not feeling right, I'm not feeling good. Mm-hmm. And often that's just the tip of the iceberg mm-hmm. because it's a lot deeper. And the more you question it, you realize that the person has depression. They're suffering a lot more than they're telling you. Mm-hmm. And sometimes if the spouse is with them, then the spouse will actually say, look, this is what's going on in the home. Mm-hmm. I think part of it is, it's not just our community. There's a little bit of a stigma attached to mental health issues, and it's so unfortunate. Because a physical injury we can see, and we can sympathize with a person. Oh, you have a broken arm, you're walking with a limp. But the psychological injury, you don't know. You could see somebody walking, someone comes in the office, you just don't know what's going on inside. It's inside their head.
True.
So it's important to be able to ask the right questions to elicit the response the truthful response of what's going on inside them. And once we've done that, once we've identified that there is a psychological issue, then we can actually help the person. Okay, have they spoken to their doctor about it? Do they need a referral to a psychologist? And what type of claim we can do because of the psychological injuries. So it's very important for people to be upfront and honest if they have these issues, because it doesn't go away. They need treatment and they need compensation for what has happened to them.
Now, you just said once you establish that there is a psychological injury here, so how do we actually establish that? Like, do you go to the doctor and they have a little checklist? How do you actually establish, yes, this is something more?
Right. Well, obviously, you know, at our office, we are not doctors. So the key is that the person, if they have issues, depression-related issues, anxiety issues, phobia issues, talk to the doctor about it, because the doctor can help. The doctor could refer to specialists, prescribe medication. And secondly, for our purposes, and a lot of people don't realize this, every time you go to the doctor has a chart. The doctor writes down what you say, what their diagnosis is, and what the plan of action is. In an injury claim, whether it's a disability claim against an insurer or whether it's a car accident, those doctor's notes are disclosed to the insurance company for the other side, or your own insurance company if the dispute is with them. And we go back a number of years. So if the person has not complained about psychological issues, but they really have them, sometimes it's unfortunate because the other side meaning the insurance company or the other driver's insurance, will say, look, you're saying you have psychological issues and you want to be compensated.
Where's the proof?
You've never complained to your doctor.
Yeah.
So going to the doctor has two purposes. Number one, obviously, to get you better. And number two, it provides a documentary proof that the condition in fact exists. So the first step is see the doctor. Right?
So they go see the doctor, they get diagnosed, maybe get an initial sense of treatment, medication, or maybe some therapy, counseling, and then how do they go about finding a claim with you?
Right. Okay, let's have some hypotheticals. Let's say it's a car accident. So if there is psychological trauma, a treatment plan can be submitted to one's own insurer from a psychologist to request an assessment and psychological treatment. If the insurance company denies it, they'll have their own psychologist look at them as well to see if the assessment was necessary. Even if it comes back, no, that's not, we can apply for mediation. There's an administrative process to dispute that finding. And at the end of the day, if they're able to fight and get that treatment, it can benefit and they can help to get better. And also it honestly builds their case up as well. If it's legitimate and if there's a diagnosis that the psychologist can validly provide. So that's one step of proving. The burden of proof is always on the plaintiff, the person who is alleging that they were wrong. Then it's on the civil standard, it's on the balance of probabilities. So there is that burden. How do you do it? Through their testimony, through family testimony, and through reports, psychological reports, family doctor reports.
Okay. So it's very, very interesting. And then if, let's say, they are accepted, what kind of benefits could they expect? So you were mentioning already that they could be seeking payment for getting, I guess, therapy or counseling.
Right. So again, we'll look at the car accident setting for it's I guess more people have heard of it, or more used to that. So we have the no-fault scheme, which involves treatment, which will help them get back to work. It might help them get better. And the fault scheme, the lawsuit against the driver at fault. There could be compensation for pain and suffering for the psychological injury, compensation for economic loss that the psychological injury has created. On a disability type of file, a long-term disability file, it's compensation for under the contract. The person can't work because of a psychological injury. Now they get paid monthly, or they end up with a lump sum type of settlement.
Okay, that's very interesting. Let's also talk about, get back to the South Asian community. The reason why I think these claims are so interesting is because the proof. You know, I think, a lot of the injuries that maybe the claims you see that it's like, you have a car accident, Bob broke his arm, he had this cut. It's very specific. We know the incident, we know what happened with psychological. It's like, how do you know where it started, how far it goes? And then you were mentioning the doctor. I feel like a lot of people, especially in the South Asian community, it's just expected that, it's stress, it's depression, it's part of life. You got to just kind of keep going. So I feel like that makes it even more difficult with it. So do you find there's any other kind of forms of advice we can give to people to say, if you're going through something like this, how do you make sure that you're taking the steps to make a very strong case for yourself?
Right, there's no question. Everybody has stress in their life. We all do. It's part of human nature. But where that stress becomes anxiety or depression and is debilitating on the person, affects their daily life, affects their ability to earn a living, this is where help is needed for them. Because without doing that, the consequences are disastrous. There's suicide, there's marriage breakups, alienation from children and parents. So the important thing is get the medical help. And if it occurs in a legal context, a disability claim or a car accident, obviously go to a competent lawyer who understands these type of claims.
Excellent. All right, we got lots more to talk about, including I want to go back to your app. I remember last time we were talking about that and making sure it's very, very quick and easy for people to document. So we're going to talk about that, but we got to take a little break again, so we'll be right back. Welcome back to Asian Digest on ATN. I'm your host, Damon Dillon, still chatting with Nainesh Kotak. Now, Nainesh, we've been talking about psychological claims. We've talked about your practice. I want to actually now talk about, let's say someone's case has been rejected. Let's say they went to somebody else. I don't know why they would, because you're so popular, but let's say they did, and unfortunately their claim was denied. So talk to us a little bit about what do they do? Is that it, or can we still help them?
Right. Often there's an appeal process, whether it's through litigation appeals or through administrative appeals within a tribunal, such as under the Canada Pension Plan Act. And it's very important that if someone is rejected, they have their claim rejected, they come to a lawyer very quickly, because there are limitation periods, and those limitation periods are governed under the Limitations Act, but also under specific legislation and contract as well.
And on average, it's about a year, isn't it?
Well,
or does it differ?
No, it does differ.
Okay.
Sometimes you have 2 years, sometimes you have 1 year, and you can contract out of that sometimes to have less. So it's very important to go to a lawyer quickly. I'll give you a good example of this. In long-term disability claims, when a person is denied, there usually is an internal appeal mechanism. And what happens, the insurance company will say, okay, you've got 30, 60, or 90 days to submit more evidence. So they go get a doctor's letter. It might take longer, but they send it out, comes back again, denied again. Then they'll say, okay, we'll give you another 90 days. And it usually goes on for about a good 3 steps. But what is happening while those steps are happening, the limitation period to sue is still ticking. Okay, so now you've got less time to sue. And I'll tell you my advice based on experience. Usually these internal appeal mechanisms, they fail. Okay, I'll be quite upfront. The denial stands. Unless it's just something that, look, they needed some clarification, the doctor didn't fill out a form, then obviously go ahead and do that. More often than not, however, those internal appeal mechanisms fail and the person is rejected. The way I look at those type of cases, if an insurance company is denying the disability claim, and you've given them what medical evidence you have. You've given them the physician's certificate, the employer's certificate, the employee's certificate, and there's a denial, come to a lawyer. What we do is we litigate these claims very quickly. We start the action fast. At the same time, we ask for the claims file, and we ask for the medical records, all simultaneously. And this, quite frankly, creates pressure on the insurance company to make some decisions. Do they want to really fight this case over the long term, or do they want to sit down and talk? So if you sit back and let everything just happen, and a lot of people do that, unfortunately, and again, going back to those who have psychological impairments, the last thing they need to see is that denial, that denial letter, that stamp denial, because it hurts them more, it affects them more. They become more depressed, more anxious. And in fact, when I start a lawsuit, I allege that the denial itself has made their condition worse. So we actually allege that and ask for punitive damage in claims. So I guess in a nutshell, the most important thing is when the denial happens, if it's a denial based on substance, they're saying we don't believe you qualify, as opposed to, well, could you get us this doctor's letter? Go to a lawyer quickly and get the claim moving, because there's a good chance the claim could be successful if it's advocated properly, if it's a legitimate claim, and if the person has been seeing the right doctors.
So question for you, if let's say, especially psychological conditions, if they don't have the support, I can only imagine sometimes they just might not want to deal with it, right? Maybe they might want to walk away for a bit. Let's say they come to you in, let's say, a year or two after the denial. Is there anything we can do, or is it that's why it's so important to make sure to get within the limitation period?
There's some case law that will allow you to, in some way, circumvent the limitation period. For example, if the denial was not final, if it was not unequivocal, if it was not very clear that, hey, this is it.
Yeah.
I've been successful in arguing, in fact, that even though you said this is a decision, the fact that you gave more appeal rights, you never said this is final, now your limitation period must be under the Limitations Act and not under the contract. But it's right rolling the dice. You don't want to have to go to court and argue that limitation period in front of a judge, because if you lose, you lose. So it's better to go on the safe side. If there's been a denial, go to the lawyer earlier than later. And you know what happens when people come to us, then we take that burden. They don't have to deal with that insurance company on their own anymore. We deal with them. We write to them, we go to court with them, we prepare the client if they have to go to court or discovery as well. So often it just relieves a lot of pressure on the client themselves.
Absolutely. I don't think it's fun at all during those phone conversations when you have to fight for your own case and you're dealing with your condition, right? So best of all, and the reason why I ask that is because, I understand people have, different situations where maybe right now if they're dealing with the claim, they can come to you, but also there's people that might be thinking back to when they had a claim many, many years ago. So there is hope, and the fact is that you do a free assessment.
Absolutely.
So really, there's nothing that they can lose if they come to you and just say, hey, even if they're not sure, best thing is to come contact you, right?
Exactly. What we do is we do a free assessment.
Yeah, it doesn't cost you anything.
They come in, we sit, and often it ends up being more than one session before the person decides that they want to retain us. We don't do a hard sell. We don't pressure people to retain us. We give the advice, and they make the decision. And what we do is a service as well, because legal services cost money. We wait till the end. We get paid when the client gets paid.
Yeah.
And that really opens justice up to everybody.
Fantastic. I think that's great. I mean, at the end of the day, get educated, right? So it doesn't hurt to come to you into your office and find out what they can get for themselves. So let's actually tell people how they can get in touch with you then.
Sure. All right. Well, our local telephone number is 905-755-8900. Our webpage, kotaklaw.com. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook as well. So we're quite savvy when it comes to electronic communications. And most important thing is, if you are injured, if you have been wronged by an insurance company, by another driver, it can affect you both physically and psychologically. And do not hesitate to come to a lawyer, because we are there. We're there to help. I've been practicing for 20 years, and this is all I do. I don't do any other type of law.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for coming in. It's always so educational chatting with you. And please do check out the website and give them a call if you would like to find out more information. Thanks again for coming in. And that brings us to the end of the show. You've been watching ATN, and I'm your host, Amin Dillon.